Alright, welcome back to Redneck Rantings. It is Saturday, May the 4th, 2019. We got us a brand new rant. I'm sorry that I've been away from the page for a couple of days. Me and the wife have been dealing with kind of an emergency type situation here. Everything's cool between her and I, but in one of those moments where life just decides, you know what, things are going a little too smoothly for you people, we sort of got hit with an anvil out of left field on Friday afternoon, and we've had to spend the last couple of days dealing with that. So I haven't been able to get back to the page like I needed to because I had some fires I had to put out. There's been a couple of political topics I've been wanting to talk about, but I'm going to put a pin in those because today, as you may be aware, is like I just said, it's May the 4th. In some circles, that's known as Star Wars Day because, hey, May the 4th be with you, you lisping Thilly Perthang you. And as you may or may not be aware, a few days ago, April 30th to be precise, one of the most iconic figures in the Star Wars universe, Peter Mayhew, the actor who played Chewbacca in the original Holy Trilogy and in some of the later films, passed away. He died in his Texas home, and as I like to put it, he has become one with the Force. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about that, and I'd like to talk about an experience that I had with Peter when I was privileged to meet him. And now that I've had a chance to really think about this, because it's like the second or third take that I've done with this, it's actually starting to really hit me and hurt me that a beloved childhood hero has passed away. Chewbacca was pretty universally regarded as the most beloved character in the Star Wars universe. In fact, one of the books that they wrote about, like one of the fictional books that they wrote, actually killed the character off because what had happened is they punched out all these other books, and it's like, well, numbers are starting to lag, it's getting a little bit stale, the readers aren't really paying attention anymore, we got to shake things up, what can we do? I know, let's kill off a major character. Who do we kill off? We should kill off the most beloved character in the universe because that'll really get people's attention. And so they killed Chewbacca in the book Vector Prime, several years ago. A gentleman by the name of R.A. Salvatore, for fellow geeks. You know him as the creator of Drizzt Do'Urden from the Forgotten Realms books. Another major iconic character in certain circles of fandom. And what they did was they had Salvatore write a Star Wars novel in which they killed Chewbacca by dropping a moon on him. Which, you got to admit, is a pretty badass way to die. It's like, no, I went up against the Empire, I faced the Sarlacc and Boba Fett, I was a prisoner of Jabba the Hutt. Y'all motherfuckers got to hit me with a moon to do me in. And I loved it because there was I actually read a comic book one time where they went back to Kashyyyk, the Wookiee homeworld, and Chewbacca's father was talking about how I know for a fact that my son is still alive, because it would take more than having a moon dropped on him to kill off my son. Which is kind of like saying, yeah, he's the biggest badass in the galaxy. No. Now, for me, and obviously for a lot of other people, Chewbacca really was the heart and soul of Star Wars. When the original movie first came out, the Star Wars A New Hope first came out, I was 5 years old. And you got to understand, this was in 1976. We didn't have all this CGI and all these big special effects extravaganzas. A lot of the stuff that we take for granted now has been built upon things that George Lucas had to invent in order to make the original trilogy happen. A lot of the filming techniques, a lot of special effects techniques. In many ways, Star Wars was a transformative movie, not just for the individual fans, but for movies as a whole, because in a lot of ways he literally changed how they make movies. But for me, the big thing at the time, and to this day, I mean, I'm 47 years old, and 42 years later, the big thing for me is this sense of wonder and awe and amazement at everything that was happening. You know, this distant galaxy with noble forces fighting against great evil, and this titanic struggle of the little guy versus the big guy, and endless variety of life and endless horizons. And it's what made me fall in love with science fiction. And it didn't take me very long to latch onto Chewbacca as really kind of my personal hero within the saga. I mean, don't get me wrong. The other characters, they each have their place. Who doesn't like Han Solo, the dashing space rogue, who's just in it for the money but winds up being a good guy despite himself. My wife has always loved Princess Leia, and big respects to Princess Leia, because she was royalty and a legit badass in her own right. She was a warrior without any question. Luke Skywalker can suck it. I'm sorry. He was a whiner in the first movie. He was a whiner in the third movie. He was a whiner in every movie he's been in. Shut the fuck up, Luke, okay? You've got magic space wizard powers, and all you can do is bitch. Shut up. Nobody's listening. Nobody cares. You're a whiner. And then there's Chewie, who gets into all of these fixes and all these ridiculous jams simply because of loyalty to his best friend. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Here's a guy who is traveling around. I mean, you've got to look at it from his perspective. Here's a guy who is traveling around with all these little tiny people whose language he doesn't speak, and only one of them can really understand what he says. And they're running around the galaxy. They're essentially fighting, interplanetary Hitler. They've got bounty hunters after them. They've got, they've got the equivalent of, Pablo Escobar wanting their heads on a stick. And he can avoid this simply by going, you know what? No, I'm out. I didn't sign on for this. You keep getting yourself into these messes. You start getting yourself out of them. I'm done with you and your stupid nonsense. Instead, he sticks around, despite the fact that he almost gets killed about 100 times because of Solo and his bullshit. And he does it out of pure loyalty, simple friendship. Okay, he could have said, this isn't me, man. This isn't what I'm here for. And he could have put his own ass first. Instead, he did the right thing, and he stayed out of loyalty to his friends and loyalty to a cause bigger than himself. And as, a screwed up little kid growing up in a very toxic family where, loyalty and a true moral code really wasn't something you saw a lot of examples of, that really got me. That really spoke to me. And so I kind of latched on to Chewie. And I'm not going to lie to you, when I found out that Peter had passed away, I legitimately cried. I mean, I was gut shot by that. And so I want to talk some more. I want to talk about what he meant to me. To me, he was the embodiment of bravery and selflessness and doing what's right even when it's going to get you killed. I may not win, but it's not about winning. It's about stepping up and putting your ass on the line for the right reasons. And if you go down, hey, at least you go down swinging. Okay? In some ways, I kind of like to think of Chewie as a space Viking. It's like, I'm going to Valhalla, but I'm taking some of you fuckers with me. I don't care. And it happened that I was able one day to meet Mr. Mayhew. I help organize, my wife and I, we organize a convention here in the Twin Cities that I'm not going to name because obviously I post some fairly controversial stuff here, and I don't want to stain the convention by naming it on this channel because, some people might decide, oh, if this is the kind of person that's running this convention, I don't want anything to do with it. It's really a good time. But I found out several years ago that Peter was going to be our guest of honor at the convention that year. And I find this out like 6 months in advance. And I was freaking out because like all of a sudden I'm 5 years old and it's like, oh my God. And like any other guest of honor, and and to this day, he is the biggest name in the genre that we've had attend the convention. We were able to get Counselor Troy one time. We were able to get Jason Carter, who played Marcus on B5 one time. So we've had some names, but I mean, you literally don't get any bigger than the Mighty Wookiee. And so I was just all hopped up about this, like for months in advance. I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be so cool. I get to meet the man himself. I get to shake the hand that fired the bowcaster. This is going to be badass. How do I celebrate this momentous moment in my life? How do I do this? Like what? And I decided on a tattoo. And you can see I've got a tattoo here. I've got a couple of others. And for me, all of my tattoos are very, very significant to me. There's not just, stuff that I just throw on my body. It has to mean something to me. And so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to get a tattoo of Peter's autograph on my shoulder. I was going to get him to sign my shoulder, and then I was going to ask him, and I was going to pay a, a tattoo artist to go over it with their equipment. And I made this plan, and I announced it to my now ex-wife, and she freaked out, and she was completely opposed to it, and, she just, like, had this weird anxiety, what are people going to think thing. It's like, fuck you. Talking about, no, because, like, she was convinced that he was going to be offended or think I was a stalker or a creeper or weirdo. Okay, I'm a little bit creepy, and I am a weirdo. But one thing about Peter is that he always loved his fans. I never heard of a single story of him, of a fan having a bad moment with him. By all accounts, even on his bad days, he was always very gracious and appreciative of the life that he was able to live because of his fans. And, but my ex is all freaking out. It's like, no, he's going to be offended by this, and they're going to ask you to, and he's going to refuse to do it, or he's going to have the con security take you away and kick you out of the convention, and then it's going to be like a year of me having to live with you moping over this shit. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this, and if it falls wrong, it falls wrong. Fuck it. And so I paid in advance a local tattoo artist, the same one who did the ink on my forearm, in fact. And I made the appointment. I gave the money in advance. And I waited. And I held on to my receipt. And I waited. And I researched the bus routes from the convention hotel to the tattoo parlor. And his first signing that day was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And I think I got up at 5. And I swear I'm not making this part up. And I think I was down there in a chair sitting at the sitting in front of the signing table at like 6 a.m. I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I went over to a local coffee shop. I got a breakfast sandwich and a hot chocolate, and I sat in this chair reading a book for 3 hours waiting for my childhood hero to show up. And he shows up, and even though I'd been there for hours, like it was like, I think 2 hours before anybody else showed up. I think I was like third in line, somewhere like third or fifth in line, something like that. And it gets to be my turn. And I hand him a Sharpie magic marker. And I roll up my sleeve, and I say, Mr. Mayhew, would you please sign my shoulder? He says, I don't understand. I said, would you please sign my shoulder, sir? Here's a magic marker. Please sign your autograph on my shoulder. He says, well, wouldn't you rather have, like a signed photograph or something? If you have some other memorabilia, I'd be happy to sign that. I said, no, sir, I really need you to sign my shoulder. He says, well, it's going to wash off. I mean, I know it says permanent, man. It says permanent, but it's not really permanent. It will wash off. I said, Mr. May, he says, if it's about money, and he was really sweet about this. He says, if you don't have $10 for a photograph, we can work something out. You can buy me a coffee, or you can buy me a drink at the hotel bar. We can figure something out. I said, and it's like, and I'm finding myself getting into an argument with a man that I've admired since before I could tie my own shoes. And there's a line of people piling up behind me going, come on. And I realized that I'm actually starting to get cross with this man that I have loved literally more than my own father since I was a little kid. And I'm like, I counted to him like, Mr. Mayhew, excuse me one moment, please. And I reached into my pocket and I pulled out the receipt for the tattoo appointment, and I said, would you please just take a look at this? And he says, okay, this appears to be a prepaid receipt for $50. I said, yes, sir. Would you please read the name of the business it's a receipt from? And he read out loud the name of the tattoo parlor. He says, this says it's a tattoo shop. I said, yes. I said, for 6 months now, sir, I have had an appointment set up to have your signature tattooed into my flesh. I've paid in advance. And I mean, obviously I wasn't being this intense about it because, I wasn't yelling at him because frankly I would have gotten beaten to death by an angry mom. How dare you talk to Chewie that way? Get him! And I would have got my ass kicked. Not by him because he was a sweetheart, but his fans would have eaten me for breakfast. But I said, sir, for 6 months now, I have had this appointment set up. I said, and with the utmost respect and quite frankly some very real affection, because you are far and away my favorite member of the Star Wars cast, I'm going to be late to my bus, and I'm going to be late to my appointment. So this isn't a joke, this isn't a prank, this is not going to wash off. I am getting your signature tattooed into my skin. I have the money for the signature, and I gave him the money. I gave him the cash. I said, if you would please just sign my shoulder, I'll be on my way, and if you think it's weird at all, I promise not to bother you the rest of the convention, but I've been planning this for a long time, and it's kind of a childhood dream come true. And he looks at this, and he looks at me, and he looks at this, and he looks at me, and he hands me back the receipt. He says, and I'll never forget this. And the other thing I'll always remember is he's sitting down, and his wife, this adorable, sweet little English lady who he's been with since 1999, really wonderful woman, is standing next to him, and she's watching this interplay, just tickled to death by it, and more than a little bit confused. And the part that I'll always remember is they were at eye level. He's sitting down, she's standing up with her hand on her shoulder like, I've got the ultimate Star Wars collectible. And they're at eye level with one another, and he hands me back the receipt, and he says, I think this may be the most elaborate wind-up I've ever been subjected to, but I'll tell you what. You come back to this convention with my signature tattooed into your shoulder, or anywhere else, and you show it to me, and I'll buy you whatever you want at the hotel bar. Well, folks, I'm Irish, and I was already planning on doing this, and now I've got the added bonus of free alcohol on the dime of my childhood hero. Yeah, gonna happen. I said, okay, sir, you're on, and I shook his hand, and I rolled up my sleeve, and you can see it right there. Peter Mayhew, LTWW. The LTWW stands for Let the Wookiee Win. And I very specifically asked him to do that part. He says, well, what's the LTWW stand for? I said, Let the Wookiee Win. Of course, he just clapped his hands. I love it. He says, I still think you're pulling my leg, but please come back and show me that, that you've done this. I would love to see it. And so I go to I leave the hotel, and I get the tattoo done, and I come back. Excuse me. And this is in July in Minnesota. And it's like 90-some degrees outside. But they've got the air conditioning just absolutely pegged, so it's like maybe 60 inside the hotel. And I'm walking through the hotel with no shirt on, just a kilt and a pair of combat boots and no shirt, and I've got the bandage from the fresh tattoo just on there, and I'm just wearing it like the badge of honor, just like, yes, I have this. Well, I'm a known man at this convention. I'm one of the organizers. I'm very well known among the gamers there. People know who I am, and they see this bandage, and they're like, oh, they're coming up to me, Bob, oh my God, are you hurt? What happened? Did you fall down? Did you hurt yourself? What happened? And I think over the course of about 50 feet, I had to pull off the bandage 3 times to show people. They're like, oh my God, that's the real thing. And they kept on trying to poke it, and I grabbed people. It's like, don't touch my fucking tattoo. And I'm looking around, because like I wanted to show my wife, and I wanted to tell her how well it went, because I didn't have a cell phone on me. This was back before I carried a cell phone very often. And I knew that she could typically be found in the hotel bar. So I'm like, I'm going to go show her, and I'm going to tell her that, see, he didn't freak out. He didn't have a problem with it. And I walk into the hotel bar, and who should I find sitting at a table with my wife at the time but Peter Mayhew and his wife Angie. And I walk in, and they see me, and Peter says, "Hey, there he is." And he sees the bandage, and he says, "You didn't." And I said, "I did." He says, "Well, sit down, let me see it." And so they make room, and I peel it off, and he looks at it, and he says, and he was just awestruck. And he says, I have to tell you, Bob, I've been doing these appearances ever since the first movie. And you're the first person in all of these years. I've been to every country in the world, all of my fans, all of the amazing things that I've seen people do to express their affection for me and this character. You're the first person ever to get my signature tattooed into their skin. And I meant what I said. Please, whatever you want from the hotel bar. He flagged a waitress. He says, "Miss, please get this man a drink. Put it on my tab." And we sat and we talked for a while. And he was just so gracious and so sweet and such a nice man. And he asked me to send him a copy of a picture of the photograph. And understand, this was several years ago. This was before all this 4G LTE cell phones. I'll Snapchat you this. We had to take a physical Polaroid, scan it into a computer, and email it to him. And for about a year, the only way you could get into the main body of his website was to click on that picture, which to me is maybe the biggest honor I've ever experienced in my life. And the thing that I'll always take away from it is there were probably 2,000 people at this convention. And for a few minutes, this iconic, wonderful man whose acting had been so much a part of my childhood. Indeed, one of the few good things about of my childhood was watching the Star Wars movies. And just this sweet, gracious man was treating me like I was the only human being in the hotel. Like I was the only point of interest in the hotel. And this was many years ago, and it still tears me up. And I can still remember, it literally just happened. I can remember how sweet and kind his wife was and how much in love they were. Those two, you could tell they were still on their honeymoon, even though it had been years that they'd been married. And I remember he shook my hand, and he thanked me, and there was this part of my brain, my little inner 10-year-old was just freaking out. "I'm having a whiskey with Chewbacca." And I almost stole I came this close to stealing the glass from the hotel bar just to save it as a keepsake. But he really was just such a nice man. He was so cool about the whole thing. He treated me like a friend. And I remember I saw him a couple of times after that, and every time he was so kind and so welcoming. I could tell there was a couple of times when he was in pain because he had back and leg and joint issues. But when he saw me, I'm like, "You probably don't remember." "Of course I remember you. How are you doing, Bob?" And that's how I'm always going to remember him. Of course, I'm always going to remember Chewbacca, the brave space warrior fighting the evil empire, saving his friends, and putting his friends in loyalty ahead of his own ass. But the man I'm going to miss is Peter from England, the actor who has been all over the world and helped make arguably 3 of the greatest movies of all time in the science fiction genre happen. I don't think there really could have been a Star Wars without Chewbacca. I'm always going to remember Peter from England treating me, a fucking nobody from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then later fucking Minneapolis, St. Paul, like the most interesting human being in the building for half an hour. And I'll always be grateful to that. Just as I'll always be grateful for the happy memories I have of the movies. I'll never forget how special he made me feel and how illustrative it was of the kind of man that he was, and how he always loved his fans, and how he was always a kind person and generous with his time. Anybody can throw money at a thing. Peter was generous of himself, and he never, ever forgot for 1 minute that he had this amazing life because of his fans, and he never hesitated to express that gratitude. And I'm going to miss him. And I guess that's really all I have to say. This video's run 25 minutes now. But, Peter, I don't know if there's an afterlife. If there is, I hope you found a good place, because you certainly earned it. You brought joy to probably literally billions of human beings. I know you've brought no small amount of joy to me and my family. In your own way, you helped me figure out what it meant to be a man and what values I wanted to incorporate into myself. And I hope that wherever you are, there's people being nice to you. I hope that your back and your legs don't hurt anymore. And I hope that it's a good place. And I hope I get to see you again one day. That's all. Peace out. May the Force be with you.